Hey guys and girls, bored now, back with Rachel Macdonald for our monthly list. So this is going to be a little bit later than planned, but this is November's list, and this is going to be top 10 90s films. And this one was voted for by you guys because I've got a selection of different decades for you to vote on. 90s came out the winner, so me and Rachel have each done a top 10. Know your picks as well in the comments below. But because of the age, me and Rachel both are similar sort of age. It means we did grow up in the 90s and we have a lot of knowledge of movies from that time period. It's probably your favorite decade for film, isn't it?
It is. I love the 90s. It's kind of my favorite decade for a lot of things. And
A lot of things.
part of that probably does have to do with the fact that my formative years really were in the 90s because I was born right in the middle of the 80s. So I went from a kid to a teen in the 90s. I absorbed a lot of the pop culture of the 90s, the music, the styles, the movies. This was definitely my decade. And you were a little bit older, but you would have absorbed a lot of the 90s culture as well, wouldn't you have?
Yeah, I did. We were big into a lot of 90s movies, and some of them have dated better than others, it's fair to say, but
that's true, yes.
It obviously does have certain characteristics you associate with it, as all decades do, really. But so the fact that it probably is your favorite decade for movies, did that make this an easy list or a harder list too?
I thought it was going to be a hard list, but then when I sat down and did it, it actually turned out to be really easy to pick my absolute faves because I do have certain movies that I have just loved from the 90s that have just stayed with me. I mean, there are tons of others. If you wanted me to, I could easily rattle off a top 50 movies of the 90s. But no, just the movies that I've got on my list, these are movies that, I've just loved since the 90s and have never stopped loving and have always revisited and gone back to. I mean, I've got a few that are, critical successes. I've got a few that you're going to be like, really, Rachel? But it should be interesting. Some of them, are from childhood. But as we were talking off screen, I'm very interested to see what your list was. How did you go with the list? Was it a difficult list for you?
It wasn't too bad. It was quite difficult, probably just because of volume of films I've seen over that decade. A lot of times these lists are personal taste, so
yes.
Sometimes if you step back from that and you're a bit more objective and you're just ranking them as movies like they're overall, then the list could turn out very different. But it is one of the best things about lists, and it is so personal to you, and it's what these movies meant to you at a certain age. So
absolutely,
that's always important to mention. But also, I think, like you just said there, you could have done a top 50. I think with some of these lists, and this is probably one, we will go back and do a bigger list at some point.
Looking forward to this list because some of the lists that we've done before, like obviously our horror villain list and our favorite horror movies, because we know each other with regards to that genre, we were able to predict, a lot of each other's picks. But this one, I feel like we're going in very blind and we just have no idea what the other one's going to put on the list because we're going for a decade rather than a genre. So there's so much more to choose from.
That's true.
10. Okay, so this one is, I think you're going to have fun when I tell you this one, and you're probably going to be like, oh, Rachel, why? And I'm sure a lot of other people will. So at my number 10 is the 1997 cinematic masterpiece, Spice World, the movie.
Oh, you're kidding.
I'm not.
Most of the cast admitted and they only did it for the money.
Well, that's fair enough. Look, you're talking to the girl who literally flew from Australia to England to see the Spice Girl reunion tour. So, look, I love the Spice Girls. I love this movie. Obviously, this is not some great cinematic masterpiece. This is definitely my nostalgia and my childhood creeping up. That being said, Spice World definitely gets more hate than it deserves. It's not a bad movie. It's not a great movie, but it doesn't take itself too seriously. The girls definitely don't take themselves too seriously. They know that they can't act. Everyone else in the movie knows that they can't act, and they just kind of go with it. It lampoons almost everything to do with the Spice Girls. It makes fun of them. It makes fun of the press. dress. It makes fun of like their manager is played by Richard E. Grant, and he is
I was going to say he's in it,
fantastic.
so that's one thing I can
He is
say in its favour.
brilliant. Clifford, their manager, is always screaming. He's always angry. He's always on the verge of a nervous breakdown. But the best thing is they also have this bigger, shadowy figure called the Chief, which kind of pokes fun at the idea that there was always this big mechanical machine behind the Spice Girls and always a big man type of thing. And the Chief is played by Roger Moore. And he's always walking around with his
I forgot he was in it.
and holding his animals and saying these absolute ridiculous phrases that make no sense. There are 1,000,001 cameos in this movie. There are so many stars in here. You've got Bob Geldof, Elton John, Jennifer Saunders, just a bunch of others that you're just like, oh my God. Plus, you know, the soundtrack is the Spice World album, which back in the 90s was a great album. I still love the album. Obviously, I'm a big pop fan. And the movie is just, it doesn't run too long. It doesn't take itself too seriously. It just follows a week in the life of the girls. It has a bunch of really over the top scenes. Like there's a scene where aliens come to Earth and meet the Spice Girls. Like, this is what I mean. The movie just does not take itself seriously at all. Meatloaf plays their bus driver. He's fantastic. They drive around the country in this big bus, which is basically a TARDIS. It's 1,000 times bigger on the inside than it is on the outside. And it's just a really fun movie. So yes, definitely some nostalgia, definitely some Spice Girl obsession coming into play. But this is a movie I've loved since I was a kid. I still rewatch it. I still enjoy it. So I have to put it on this list because it's just so close to my heart and so close to like my love of the Spice Girls. So that's my number 10. I knew you were gonna have a go at me for it or roll your eyes, but I don't care. Ignore the haters. Spice World the movie is in at number 10.
Well, yeah, I was certainly surprised when you came out with that. I probably shouldn't have been because I know you're a big fan, but I guess I just forgot about it. I can't really say it's bad because I've never seen it. It just, and I love Richard E. Grant. I knew he was in it. It calls for big pop stars. If you get the right directors and writers, they because a similar one to that I saw, which was actually surprisingly good, was the movie with Anton Dekin, Alien Autopsy.
Wow.
Which had Harry Dean Stanton in, and that's a similar thing to Richard E. Grant. That's a marketable. Yeah. But yeah, I went into that thinking it was going to be rubbish, and I was surprised, pleasantly surprised. So it just shows you. Okay.
If you watch the Spice World movie without a condescending attitude and just go in for a little bit of fun and some fun pop music, it's a good time. Very tongue in cheek.
So this is always one of the big things, but what are their performances like? Are they just playing like versions of themselves? So it's quite easy.
So they're playing exaggerated version of the ginger baby posh sporty scary personas, but they're very, very good at them. Victoria in particular is fantastic at making fun of herself. Like there's this great scene where they have to do this obstacle course and they're all decked out in like army gear and the girls are all like going on the army and Victoria just walks past in her little mini dress and her high heels and doesn't even bother looking at the obstacle course. And you just think this girl is having so much fun just making fun of herself. And they have a whole scene where they poke fun at the personas that have been built up. The girls are not terrible. Like they're not wooden, but you can tell that they've given them very basic scenes and very basic lines, and they mostly shine when they're doing performances. You know, they've obviously got them singing a lot and doing rehearsals and stuff. So not awful. Like you wouldn't come away going, oh my God, these girls are terrible. They should never be in a movie. Passable. They do just enough to make the movie work, to make their caricatures work, and then they know enough to let the bigger hitting actors around them kind of carry the more comedic and the more, dramatic parts of the movie off real life events that just sound so crazy but actually happened to the Spice Girls.
The Grant thing. A very underrated 90s film with him in, which I'll just reveal isn't on my list anyway, but is Hudson Hawk.
I've heard of that, but I haven't seen it.
Yeah, that's one similar to Spice World. A lot of people dismiss as a turkey, and it's actually it's a very entertaining movie. He plays like the main villain in that, and Bruce Willis is in the lead. You've got Andy McDowell.
Wow! Okay,
it's a fun
I'll have
one.
To check it out.
You should check that. Yeah, it's very early 90s. Number 10, I've gone with a Tarantino movie. and it's Jackie Brown. So,
Ah,
okay, have you seen this one?
I actually haven't. This is
No,
one
you
of the
haven't.
Tarantino films I haven't
Okay,
seen, but I have heard very good things about it.
sure. So what I'll say is, then I'm not a big Tarantino fan. I'm very hit and miss with
Fair
him,
enough.
and I'll say this is actually my favorite Tarantino movie of all of them.
Okay.
So I think the reason why is because it is a bit more grounded one, and it is one where you do have human characters that you can actually root for. So obviously the title character being a good example of that. It was this comeback for Pam Grier.
Pam
She's
Grier, yeah,
excellent in
she's
the
great.
movie because really outside of her sort of peak like black exploitation films,
Yeah.
a lot of times she hasn't been given like lead role sort of thing. So and it's one thing I'll give him credit for, Tarantino, because in the original book, that character wasn't the lead of the story, and
Oh.
he actually changed that. So
Mm.
that's something I obviously approve of because she's great, and you
Yeah.
root for her. She's obviously gets to be a bit of a badass, but she's very likable and grounded and very sort of sensitive and smart. Then you obviously have the Robert Foster character, who himself made like sort of a big comeback for the movie, and it's because Tarantino liked like a TV show that he was on in like the 70s or 80s or something. So he was a
Okay.
big fan of that, and
Mm.
he's brilliant in the film. It was his like big comeback. He got like an Oscar nomination for it. But obviously, fantastic cast. You've got Samuel L. Jackson once again
Always good.
doing his thing. Yeah, he's an entertaining but also quite a menacing villain in that film. You know,
Mm.
it's not quite the same as like Pulp Fiction, where you probably have a bit more fun with that character. But in this, yeah, I think it never lets you forget that this guy is a bit of a slime bag sort of thing. But you've just got really fun cameo style performances. So you've got De Niro playing a really shrubby sort of like stoner character. So
Oh,
it's
awesome.
almost like a less sexy, De Niro type
Yeah.
character. So you get little things like that with certain characters or certain actors that are just sending up their typical like personas.
Yeah, I
Mike
love when actors do that.
yeah, Michael
Mm.
Keaton is very good in it as well. He's very, as this sort of like wet behind the ears, sort of wannabe, slick sort of like FBI cop guy. He's very entertaining, good grounded drama with
Mm.
some characters you do root for. But it also has the other Tarantino stuff that he's associated with. So it has, witty dialogue. It's very slick, it's got a particular style. The soundtrack is really good as always. I think it
Mm.
might be his best soundtrack from any of his movies.
Yeah.
So and although it's in some ways compared with some of his other films, Pulp Fiction being a good example,
Mm.
it is a more straightforward story. You still get a
Ah.
little bit
Mm.
playful, like playing with the sort of story in, because like for example there's a big scene in like the mall where this whole heist style thing is going down, and
Mm.
they actually show you that from like three different perspectives,
Mm.
and I think that's just him having a bit of playful, this is a pulpy sort of story type thing.
Yeah.
Because I think that scene drives some people mad because it does take so long because you get these three different perspectives. But
Mm.
that's what he's doing. But it's a very, very strong movie. Great performances, entertaining at points, tense at
Mm.
other points, and it has a really beautiful ending as well. The ending really lands so well,
Oh,
and
cool.
there's just good drama and suspense to it, like when you see
Mm.
the way it plays out at the end. But yeah, for me, because I am very hit and miss with Tarantino, so personally for me, because this is a bit more of a human one story, then it is one I sort of go to a bit more than some of his other films. So that's Jackie Brown at my number 10.
Very nice. Like I said, I haven't seen that one. I hear what you're saying about Tarantino. He can be a bit hit or miss. But now that I didn't know that all of those people were in it either. I basically just knew Pam Grier, and that was it. So I think I'll definitely have to check it out. And it sounds like it'll be really good. Yeah, Tarantino films, they do go a bit up and down. My favorite is Inglourious Basterds. So yeah, but
Okay.
yeah, I'll definitely have to check that one out. Very cool. All right, so my number 9 is a comedy. Again, not the most critically acclaimed film, but this is my favorite teen comedy. I've gone with 10 Things I Hate About You.
Okay. Yeah.
So I love 10 Things. Like I said, it's my favorite teen comedy. It is one of those teen comedies that actually ages really well, considering it was made in 1999 or 98. When you think of other comedies from around that time, like She's All That and Never Been Kissed, like they don't age well. But 10 Things ages really well. You watch it now and you think it could still be a movie that was made like today. Great cast, obviously Julia Stiles in like that. This is the role that kind of catapulted her into Hollywood. The late great Heath Ledger. You had some 90s trailers like Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Larissa Oleynik, who I knew from Allison, was it Alex Mack? And also I think it's a great adaptation of a Shakespeare play. It takes a very sexist Shakespeare play, The Taming of the Shrew, and turns it into a really fun, empowering teen comedy. The character of Katarina Stratford was such an inspiration for so many teen girls everywhere to just say, fuck it, I'm just going to do whatever I want and not listen to the rules of society. And I think it's just such a fun comedy. It's really smart. All of the adult characters, the supporting characters are fantastic. The dad, who's played by, I can never remember the actor's name, but he is
I know who you
fantastic.
mean.
You know exactly who I mean, yeah.
Is it like Larry Miller or something?
Something like that, but
Because he tends to play comedic roles.
Yes,
Yeah.
but him as their overprotective father, just brilliant. This was one of Heath Ledger's, first big roles, and I think he's fantastic as Patrick Verona. I love all the little like Shakespeare nods, like the fact that they go to Padua High School and the guy's last name is Verona, and they even have a few lines of dialogue. And it's just like I watch it now, and it's still a laugh out loud film. It still has moments just make me go. Just put me in hysterics, like I want you to wear the belly and who knocked up your sister, and just all these great lines that are just so much fun. And like I said, it takes this story that in the actual Shakespeare play ends quite a sexist way. I mean, all you have to do is look at the title, The Taming of the Shrew, and know how the story is going to end. But the movie doesn't change Katerina. It just makes her a little bit more open to having relationships and, actually seeing that people aren't that bad. So I've loved 10 Things ever since I first saw it. I rewatch it constantly because it's just such a fun movie. It has a really fun 90s soundtrack, which I have a lot of fun listening to when I watch it. And I just think it's filmed really well. I think the script is really sharp. I think the characters are all really fun. And I just have so much fun rewatching this film. And like I said, it is my favorite teen comedy of all time. So that's my number 9, 10 Things I Hate About You.
Yeah, good. Well, good choice. I've only seen it once, but I remember enjoying it. Yeah, and there are quite a few strong teen films from the 90s.
Yes.
I mean, like you said, some of them probably have aged a bit bad, but there are definitely ones from that decade that have stood the test of time as well.
Yeah.
Seems like quite a big decade for like teen and coming of age style movies.
Yes, it was. Yeah, the late 90s and early 2000s had a lot of teen movies. I think they kind of exploded around then, kind of like a second wave from the 80s or something. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think maybe a film like Clueless set off a trend as well.
Definitely.
That became a big influence. My number 9 actually complements my number 10 quite well, but my number 9 is a movie called Freeway.
With Reese Witherspoon?
Yeah, starring, I was going to say, a young Reese Witherspoon.
I haven't seen it, but I've heard of it.
Yeah, like it's definitely what I would say is a Marmite film. It's sort of film you're either going to go with and latch onto, or you're probably going to really hate it. It is one of those extreme
Yeah.
divisive style cult movie, or she tries to avoid bringing it up just because it's one of these cult, very sort of edgy movies. Rene Russo with the Texas Chainsaw film she was in, it feels a bit like this. But I'll say this is a much better movie than that.
Oh,
But
good.
but what it is, and I'll say how I discovered this. Years ago, around about Christmas, like Film 4 in this country had a season of cult movies, and they were all, like, it was like pretty much 3 movies a night around
Okay.
about midnight, and it was called No Sleep Till New Year.
Oh.
And it was just like these different cult movies each night, and this was one of them. So that was the first time I saw that, and ever since I've really loved this movie. So what it is, it's a modern sort of twist on the Little Red Riding Hood story. Plays Vanessa Witherspoon does, who's a troubled sort of teen because she flips between like sort of foster homes. Her parents are like, or her mother anyway, like her father's sort of out of the picture, but like her mother, who's played by Amanda Plummer, again, a very 90s sort of actress pattern. So she just basically decides to like run away and escape and go on the road. And it's around about this time you've got this really creepy serial killer who's also a bit of a pedo, and
Oh.
he's on the loose, and so there's stuff in the news, bless you, and
Thank
and
you.
and she runs into him, and he's played by Kiefer Sutherland, which
Oh,
is
well, that's good casting, isn't it?
absolutely great casting.
Yeah.
He's brilliant in it. But so there's an altercation between them, and things transpire from there. But that's what the whole movie is. It's her journey to go and visit, and this is where the Little Red Riding Hood thing comes into it again, because she's on the road to visit her grandmother
Grandma.
when
Yeah.
this stuff happens. And yeah. So okay, so what I'll say about the movie is it's a very edgy movie. It's a very sort of stylistic movie in the way a lot of movies from the 90s looked. So it definitely has a bit of a Tarantino vibe to it. That's why I said there's a bit of a link there. But it's actually Danny Elfman who does the score, and
I
I
love
think
Elfman.
it's one of his best scores, because it's the sort of score where you can hear his sort of Tim Burton style sound in it, but they just turn it up a bit and make it a bit more like edgy and sort of out there type thing for this more wacky type cult movie. But so it's the sort of movie where it does have like bad taste style moments in it, which knowing a bit about the director and some of the other films he's done, I think that it's him pushing the envelope, because, for example, he did a Ted Bundy movie, which is this, it's a weird sort of black comedy, and he also did a movie which is notoriously hated called Tippy Toes, which is, I mean, it's got a few people in it. Matthew McConaughey's in it, Gary Oldman's in it, but yeah, it's them playing little people basically. So it's one of the
no.
And I mean, to put in some sort of context, when I saw it years ago, at the time, because times were different, I actually didn't think much about that stuff, and I thought this is actually a pretty good movie. I think Kate Beckinsale's in it as well, so it's got quite the cast. But yeah, this is an example of him just about getting the right balance, where there is bad taste stuff in it. But I think because it's meant to be a very pulpy, over-the-top cult movie, then it's not really as offensive as the others. The idea of him doing a Ted Bundy movie, but it's normal style. Because this is obviously fictionalized, it doesn't really have that same sort of problem. But there are definitely lines of dialogue and certain moments that pushes the boundaries. But it's a credit to the movie, then it ends up being as funny as it is. Like, he does make things that you would think this is so messed up, but it does actually make them really funny.
Okay.
The scene between her and Sutherland, like the main scene when he picks her up from the side of the road and she obviously doesn't know who he is. That scene is so tense, the way it plays out, because it just builds and builds in this natural sort of way where he's pretending to be someone who's listening to her because he's like a therapist style thing, and just the way it slowly turns into a much darker scene is just really tense and disturbing. But I mean, even in that scene, like when she turns the tables on him, it's actually at times a really entertaining scene, and that's what I'm talking about with this movie, where there's scenes like that you would think would never be entertaining, but they do actually have funny moments. Vanessa is such a brilliant character. Like, she's such a streetwise, strong, and very powerful because she has to be, because that's been her upbringing. She hasn't been able to rely on like the adults in her lives. That some of them are very perverse indeed. So she's sort of had that sort of upbringing, and to this day, I think it is one of Reese Witherspoon's best performances. So, but I think that's partly why I enjoy it, because it is this sort of feminine style tale where she like turns the tables on things.
Yeah.
The ending is just hilarious, but in a blackly comical sort of way, like the very final shots. But to me, like when you get a really good cult movie and it just ticks all the different boxes for what I enjoy, then it is something I really latch onto. And sadly nowadays, I don't think you get that many gems from like art house or cult style.
No, because big studios have taken over.
Yeah, that's exactly it, I think. But it just seems to be a bit of a lost art, where just this sort of gem that very few people have seen, but like the people who do see it probably really love it. It's just been lost. But as I said, it's a good cast. You've got good music, got some really good like dark humor. It's very like gritty and nihilistic at times, but also, as I said, it does have that bad taste humor.
I love a bit of bad taste humor sometimes.
Well, when you see it, you'll have to let me know what you think, because as I said, it probably is a love or hate style one. But what else? Oh, there's also a sequel which has a great title. It's called Freeway 2: Confessions of a Trick Baby.
Oh dear.
Vincent Gallo's in it, and also because Reese Witherspoon, I guess at that point was, a big
moving on.
Yeah, she's the new Black, and she's in that show. Is it Russian Doll? What's her
Natasha
name?
Lyonne?
Yeah, she's in it. Yeah, I think she.
Okay, I like Natasha Lyonne.
She's good. Yeah. So I mean, the sequel isn't as good, but it's still good. Still good.
Okay.
I'd recommend checking out the sequel. So yeah, that's Freeway, my number 9.
Cool. Well, it's another one I'll have to check out. I love a good black comedy and nihilism and bad taste humor. So I'll definitely check it out and let you know what I think once I do. See if it's a love or hate. All right. Well, with my number 8, we're going from your small little cult film to a massive big blockbuster. This is a movie that we have actually reviewed before, and we both really love this movie. I'm pretty sure we both gave it a 10 out of 10. And that is the wonderful Spielberg classic Jurassic Park. I have to have Jurassic Park on this list. It is, I mean, we covered a lot of it in our review, but this is Spielberg, like, at his best. And obviously, such a great cast. You've got Jeff Goldblum, Sam Neill, Laura Dern, Richard Attenborough, and, again, we covered it in our review. This is just one of those films that is just perfect. Everything about it is so good. The score is beautiful. The story is interesting. The effects are fantastic and actually still hold up today because they actually used animatronics instead of CGI. The characters are all fantastic. We all love Jeff Goldblum in this, but Sam Neill and Laura Dern are also just brilliant in this movie. It's such a great adventure movie. Obviously, it's got some great horror moments. Again, we talked about all of the tense moments that they have in the film. I don't think there's much more that you need to really say about this film. Everyone knows that it's just a fantastic movie. I have loved this film since I first saw it. I'm still forever bummed that I didn't get to see it at the cinema. I understand. I mean, I was quite young when it came out. I think I was 7 or 8. So I do understand my parents not wanting to take me to the cinema to see it.
Yeah.
But I just think it would, like, if they ever re-release it, I will go and see it, because I think that would be such an experience to see that movie in the cinema, just the scale of that movie and the sound and everything. And, it's just such a great film. I've loved it for so many years. I rewatch it frequently because I just enjoy it so damn much. Don't think I really need to say much more. Like I said, guys, we have reviewed this, so if you want more in-depth, go check out our Jurassic Park review. But that is my number 8, Jurassic Park.
Came down to the planet and you just wanted to show them exactly what classic Spielberg is, you would probably show them that film.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Although if it's Alien, maybe we might be better off showing
E.T. That's very true. All Close Encounters, yeah.
Yes, yeah.
I had to have a David Lynch film somewhere on the list. So my number 8, I'm going to defend this one because it does get quite a bit of hate, but it's Twin Peaks: Fire Walk with Me, the Twin Peaks
wow.
movie.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like, because we've talked about this before, I haven't seen Twin Peaks, but I do know that Fire Walk with Me gets a lot of hate, so that's very interesting.
It's a fair bit of hate, and it's probably one of those with me, it was a bit of a grower. Like, I did get more into it over more viewings. And the thing to say about it is, it only gets better over time, and I think part of the reason it gets better over time is because so much of what the recent comeback season of Twin Peaks does links back into the movie. Like, a lot of it links into the movie just as much as it does the original show. Difficult one for them to do at the time. Kyle MacLachlan didn't really want to do it because he didn't want to be typecast, so he's very briefly in the movie. Funnily enough, it's another Kiefer Sutherland movie because he makes an appearance as like the sort of Dale Cooper style FBI agent who it has one of the most beautiful endings of any movie ever. And once again, this is the thing that Lynch really does so well, is he makes the idea of death and he makes really grim things that you think about in real life as being really grim and stuff. And he just makes them somehow more accessible and more beautiful and more interesting. Because obviously the whole story of Twin Peaks, particularly when it concerns Laura Palmer, the lead character, it's a tragic story because it's this popular high school girl who had these dark secrets, and it's almost the reality of the story is she had to die to escape those dark things and escape the people around her. And that's what we see in this movie, is the final, whatever it is, 7 days, I think it is, of Laura's life. And the end of the movie, which is the moment of her death, he somehow makes into this beautiful thing where it's actually her taking back power in dying type thing. It's an incredible sequence. Once again, you got great use of music, such a good score and soundtrack. There's one particular instrumental. It's like this sort of prog, rockabilly style sounding song, blues. So that Lynch actually composed himself. But that scene, which is the scene in the club with Donna and Laura, that's a really distinct, disturbing but powerful style scene as well. And that's one of those scenes that he just lets flow and just play out, where you've got that instrumental on in the background, and it just adds this sort of edge to the scene. And it's so beautifully shot with all these neon sort of lights in it, and eventually it just ends with cigarette butts on the floor, and almost all this time later. And it works so well because it just has this sense of them starting at a certain point at the start of the night, and then the night just descending into madness, and them ending up like the worse for wear afterwards. And speaking of Donna, I'm going to say this, and it might be a bit of an unpopular opinion, but she's played by a different actress in the movie. She's actually played by Maura Kelly, and originally it was obviously Lara Flynn Boyle in the show.
Yeah.
And I think from what I understand, the reason she didn't come back for the film, I quite like Lara Flynn Boyle, but I'll just say, unpopular opinion, I think Maura Kelly's the better Donna. And
fair enough.
one of the things we see in the movie is we see more of her friendship with Laura, because obviously in the show she's already died.
Already dead,
so
yeah.
we actually see more of them as a friendship, and it makes you feel for Donna even more, because she's trying to protect her best friend, and she's and she's sort of watching her slip away into like darkness style thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of times she's given a lot of like more darker, unsettling scenes to do in the movie, and I think she's really good. It's sort of funny because the other thing I've seen her in is like she's in the first season of The West Wing.
Oh, okay.
And I hate her character in that. I'm pleased they got rid of her after season 1. But in the Twin Peaks movie, she's really good, and it brings back the majority of the characters from the show. Some have bigger roles than others. But once again, it's just a classic David Lynch movie where it has this good mix of like dark sort of humor at times, these weird, oddball interactions between characters. Obviously, there's a lot of surreal type scenes, a lot of trippy style scenes, tremendous style, great use of tension, some great, really tense scenes. But yeah, just a lot going on throughout the movie. There's 1 or 2 lines that are a little bit cheesy and I think could have been dropped. One of the things which is notoriously bad in the movie actually is David Bowie has a very small role. And
cool.
The story with that is then it was supposed to be a bigger role, but apparently he was just so bad and they cut the role down. And his storyline actually is one of the ones that carries over into like the recent series.
Oh, okay.
And so this is one of those interesting things where I think one of the reasons this film gets so much shit is because it does feel very choppy, and it does feel like things are sort of started and then maybe not followed through on. And there's obviously maybe certain reasons like that, for example. But this is why I partly say once you've seen the recent series, the movie makes a lot more sense, because it definitely picks up some of these threads and runs with them. But even so, as bad as that scene with Bowie is, I still kind of enjoy it, and I still kind of enjoy then it's part of this movie, which otherwise is very dark and disturbing. I do kind of like that it does have these more hammy, kind of batshit insane style moments. Like there's some good humor in the early part of the film with like the Kiefer Sutherland character when they're like investigating this stuff. So for me, it's an underrated film. It deserves more love than it gets, and a lot of classic Lynch stuff in there. If you're a Lynch fan, you should get a lot out of this film.
Yeah.
And definitely with the scene in the club I mentioned, and also the end scene, you've got maybe 2 of his finest ever scenes.
Oh, wow.
So that's Fire Walk with Me, my number 8.
Nice. Well, I obviously will get round to watching that at some point when we do Twin Peaks. When I watch Twin Peaks, I'll watch the whole thing. Obviously, I do love
Yeah,
it.
do it in
So,
order. That makes
yeah,
sense.
I'll do it in order and see how I go. But yeah, I do know that Fire Walk with Me was very polarizing, and a lot of fans did not like it. So I think it's
Yeah.
very cool that you've got it on your list. I'm always down for unpopular opinions and going against the grain. So that's very, very cool. All right, so my number 7 is basically a movie that if you want to know what 90s life was like, if you want a little snapshot of the 90s, you'll watch this film. I don't know if it's that well known anymore. It might be a little bit more of a cult film, but it is the wonderfully quintessential 90s film, Empire Records. So
I
have
wondered
you
if you
seen?
might have this.
Yes, I love
I
Empire
know you've
Records.
mentioned it.
Yeah. So this is a film set obviously in the middle of the 90s. It basically follows one day, just one day in this record store, this CD store. So they're right there is telling you that it's a 90s movie if we're working in a movie store. And on this one day, kind of everything explodes. So like all of the workers are having some sort of issue. They're having a famous, well, actually kind of a washed up star come into the store to sign autographs. His name is Rex Manning, and he's played by Max Caulfield, and he's brilliant. There's a fun cast. It's got Anthony LaPaglia, Liv Tyler, Renee Zellweger, Ethan Embry. So quite a few noticeable faces. Sort of problem. There's always something going on in the store, and you just follow these characters and their storylines. And the poor manager Joe, who's played by Anthony LaPaglia, is just trying to keep all of his staff in line. And that's right. There's this whole thing where they might be bought by like a bigger chain. And Joe is trying to like buy the store himself, but one of his employees, the movie starts with one of his employees taking the money that they've made that day and going and blowing it all in Vegas. So they have to deal with that problem.
Yeah.
But it's just such a funny movie. And like I said, it's so quintessentially 90s. The soundtrack is like just the most 90s soundtrack you could come across. It's got a whole lot of like alternative bands from there and some more well-known bands. It's actually a really great soundtrack. It's one of my favorite movie soundtracks. All of the actors do a really good job with their parts. No one's giving an Oscar-worthy performance, but they're all having fun. They're all doing their thing. Oh, that's right. Robin Tunney as well is in it. And her character's really great as well. And I have been watching this film since I think I first saw it when I was 16. So I saw it a little bit after the 90s, but I absolutely fell in love with it. And I remember sitting on my friend's couch and rewatching it like 3 times in a row that day because I just fell in love with the movie so much and with the soundtrack so much. And I mean, it's aged a little bit, but it hasn't aged that badly. You can still watch it today and not cringe, which is always a good yardstick. And like I said, it's just a fun ride. And if you are not enjoying the movie, enjoy the soundtrack. And it's got a lot of really random kind of oddball humor. And I just really love it. And I've loved it for so many years. And like I said, given that this is the best movies of the 90s list, and this is one of the most 90s movies you could ever come across. Like, this is one of those movies that, you pick up some movies from the 90s and you're like, oh, this could still, if you told someone this was made only 10 years ago, they might believe you. No, they won't believe you for Empire Records. This was definitely made in 1995, and you can tell.
Sure. No doubt on the soundtrack.
Yes,
that
I'm
sounds
pretty
about
sure.
right. I think they were on every 90s soundtrack.
Yes, they were, weren't they? That was such a staple of the 90s, where you had no doubt. Yes, definitely. Also, Cranberries.
Cranberries,
Cranberries. They were another big staple of the 90s. You always had the Cranberries on your soundtrack.
Yeah.
But yeah, have you seen Empire Records?
Okay. I have, and this is one where you've done yourself in, because I used to like it when I watched it in the 90s. I remember liking it, and then I rewatched it recently, and I thought it was crap.
Oh, really? Oh, that's terrible.
I think this is an example of a certain quirk from the 90s, which just hasn't aged very well for me. I'll say that Anthony LaPaglia is the best thing in the movie, because him playing Shrubby is always great, and him playing the guy who runs the store and is just so put out by all these, younger characters. That's the ideal role for Anthony Lamperia. But
Mm.
yeah, no, it's just the sort of movie. When I rewatched it, it was just so too quirky and annoying, and I just didn't get on board with the characters. I just found them annoying, and that whole them they're using to pick the
Yeah.
record. That is so terrible and
What? I
annoying.
thought it was cute.
No, it's not cute. That's quirky to a ridiculous extent. I mean, I'll probably rewatch it again, and maybe my opinion will go back the other way. But when I rewatched it recently, it's one of those sorts of things. I thought, yeah, I used to quite like this when I first saw it, and then what was I thinking? Is my fear?
You were thinking it was awesome.
No,
Now
it's
you
not.
suck.
Not
And now
awesome.
you're the man. So now I'm going to say,
So
damn the man. Save the empire.
so you hit the post with Spice World partly because I've not seen it, and I can accept, and as a massive Spice Girls fan, it was always going to be for you.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was on board more with your next pick because I remember enjoying that movie. But yeah, you've shit the bed a bit on this one. But
Nah, don't listen to Keith, people. This movie is awesome.
It's not awesome. Has it aged well? Is the question we're asking. Whose side is he on?
Okay.
My number 7, and I had to do this just for the joke.
Oh no.
But it's a movie I was going to have on the list anyway, so I've not cheated, but I've purposely put it at number 7. It is 7.
It is 7. Nice. No, I mean, I get it. The opportunity called. You had to take it.
Yeah. Because it could have gone higher, definitely, but I thought just for the gag, because it's the sort of thing where I'd compiled a certain amount of movies, and I'd sort of decided it was going on the list somewhere. David Fincher's best movies. It became probably the first one where he really laid down the marker as a real sort of calling card. And again, I think he sort of invented a subgenre of his own, really, in a way, with it, which is this urban sort of gothic style thriller type thing, which then became very sort of popular after that, and a lot of people sort of were influenced and copied it.
Yeah.
And it's a tremendous example of how to do a thriller, how to do a really nicely drawn out thriller with perfect pacing, lots of intrigue, really credible like characters. You get this really likable partnership between the Brad Pitt rookie, his first sort of big case, and then Morgan Freeman,
the worn down Morgan Freeman.
I mean, I think this might be his best ever role, Morgan Freeman. I can't imagine anyone else playing that role having seen.
No, he's very, very good. I mean, it's Morgan Freeman. He's always good, but I hear you. He's spectacular in this.
His final week on the job, basically, but it becomes this thing where he wants to stay on to see this case through. And just the contrast between those characters, one starting his career off in a very different place in his life to the Morgan Freeman character, who does have a lot more perspective, a lot more wisdom. He obviously has learned to be more detached from these things than the Brad Pitt character has at this point. And that actually plays into the drama of the film. That actually plays into the end of the movie very well, which I like. So you've got some great character writing. Obviously, Kevin Spacey, this is an early role for him. Yeah, it's a sad footnote now, but the actor himself, fantastic, and he's fantastic in the movie.
He is.
It's a great example of how a cameo can sort of steal a movie, and how it's just so memorable as this disturbing, cerebral type villain, John Doe. Because from rewatching the movie, they actually play that very nicely, where they don't actually put Spacey's name in the opening credits.
No, I remember that.
Yeah, because a lot of times now I think they would, and it would sort of spoil
and it would ruin it.
because you're waiting for him to show up.
Exactly. Whereas that scene where he just walks
Yeah.
into the police station, it's like, whoa, okay.
Bits of the plot, when you go back and rewatch, everything links up so well. Set of this killer using the seven deadly sins, and just some of the most disturbing scenes that you're likely to see in any movie, because they just feel so real and just so sort of gross. But yeah, just the character of John Doe and the way he views the world, he is almost like this crazed sort of cult leader style thing. That's probably a good way to describe him. But you've got great acting, you've got great direction, you've got good writing, you've got lots of tension and drama, and one of the great gut punch endings of certainly recent cinema anyway.
I think even now watch this film even now, that is such a gut punch, that end.
You just can't believe it. And I mean, I guess I'll get around too many spoilers in case you haven't seen the movie, but what I'll say is, like, the character involved in it, because you get to know her and you actually quite like her throughout the film, it makes what ends up happening to her even more tragic to do at some point a review of, because I think we both really love the movie, but it's got a lot to it, the movie, so many layers, and I think it definitely holds up as one of Fincher's best movies, like in the top
definitely.
3. So, and I've watched it multiple times now, so it holds up for me on multiple viewings. So 7 out of 7.
Very nice. Oh, I mean, 7. It's a great movie. It's such an unsettling movie. Some of those kills are just so horrifying and just so, but also so clever. Like you just watch and you're like, this is really clever, but also really grotesque, but also really like, wow, who managed to do this? And I agree that Pitt and Freeman work really well together. And I think this was one of Brad's like earlier roles when he was still just kind of getting into Hollywood. And yeah, it's a great movie. And Fincher is, like you said, it's definitely him at his like best.
Of him being under their nose at one point, and he slips away, because there's the scene where he's actually pretending to be a reporter or something, isn't it? And so he's right there. And that's really clever, because they obscure his face enough that you can't really tell it's like
you really just pick up on a rewatch. You're like, oh. Okay. Yeah, lots of. I think Fincher's such a great director in general, and this is some of his best work. So great. And yes, I love the 7 at number 7. That's fantastic. There's a good gag there. All right. Okay, my number 6. I think everyone's going to give me crap for this one because it's going to make me look like a basic bitch, but I don't care. I love this movie. I will always love and defend this movie. My number 6 is the James Cameron epic Titanic.
Okay.
I don't care. All of the haters can come at me. I freaking love Titanic. And I think Titanic is just one of those films that is just always going to go up and down. People will either all love it or they'll all hate it. You know, when it first came out, it ran, I think, in cinemas for like 11 months. It was such
a bit. It was for a long time. It was the highest grossing movie, wasn't it?
Exactly, and then it was only knocked off by Cameron himself. So it was like, you know, only Cameron can take on Cameron. But I do understand why people find it a little mawkish sometimes, why people might be put off by, oh, it's Romeo and Juliet on the Titanic, which it actually isn't, but that's a whole different discussion. So I do understand why people do find it cliched and maybe find it a little too cheesy, but I don't think it's acknowledged enough how good a film it actually is and what went into making it. The performances in it are really, really good. And I'm not just talking about, I mean, the 2 leads are fantastic, but you've got a great cast of supporting characters. You've got Kathy Bates. You've got, what's his name? Victor Garber is fantastic. Billy Zane's just hamming it up, having the time of his life playing this bad guy. And I find that the main character, Rose, because it really is her story, so we get very invested in her, and I think that she is a great character to center the film on. I think that Cameron knows how to film people in peril and make it exciting and make the action, kinetic and really good, but also get the human emotion. Because when you watch the actual sinking off the ship, it is such an ordeal to watch. And, it's obviously knowing that it was based on true events and that Cameron based a lot of the incidents that you see on screen on eyewitness testimony, on things that people who survived the Titanic actually said. There are specific shots that are direct references to eyewitness memories. The score, James Horner, his score, oh, he really outdid himself with the Titanic score. It is absolutely beautiful, and it's just certain parts just make me cry because they're so powerful. And I watch this movie at least once a year. I know it's long, but I love it. And every time I watch it, I get caught up in the emotion and in the characters and in the story and in what's happening. And I love it from start to finish. And it's also one of the films that I love watching the behind the scenes, because the effort that Cameron put into this film is insane. The amount of dives that he actually took to the Titanic, the way they recreated the rooms, they recreated the costumes, they even had like coaches on set to make sure all the actors were like sitting the right way and talking the right way. The way they managed to film some of the sinking, some of the technical aspects of the film that they used to portray the ship actually breaking in half and sinking. It's just amazing. And like I said, part of me does understand why people find it overrated, but I also think by the same token, it's become an underrated film because people get so caught up in Titanic is so bad, that they forget that once upon a time, people loved this film. And it actually is a really good film, a really well-made, well-constructed movie. And I know it seems a bit basic to have it on your list because it's such a well-known, pop culture osmosis movie, but I love Titanic, genuinely and unironically love Titanic. So the haters can come at me, but that is my number 6, Titanic, the ship of dreams.
Well, I told you this story the other week off air, but
Yes.
I admitted that I've never seen it, or not all the way through. I've seen
Yes.
some of it on TV, but then I did actually buy a ticket at the time. And it's because I was like 17, 18, and then I remembered it was a 3-hour movie. So I'm like, shit, I'm not sitting through a 3. So they got my money, but I went to see a different movie instead. Like my Twin Peaks pick for you, because I know you are a massive Cameron fan.
Yes.
So it probably feels like, in the same way I had to have a Lynch film somewhere on the list,
I have to have a
probably
Cameron.
had a Cameron.
Yeah.
Yeah. 6 is another thriller, a sort of thriller, and it's LA Confidential from Curtis Hanson.
Wow, I haven't seen that in years.
Years.
Russell Crowe, Guy Pearce,
Kim
Basinger.
Kevin
Yeah,
Spacey again. Yeah.
that was like a real film noir, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That one, yeah.
Like a throwback, really a pastiche to that era of Hollywood, and just something very fun and old school about it, because the press plays a big part in it, gossip columns, and this idea that they would go to such extent to get the big scoops from these stars. Then at times they would almost create their own stories, or sort of twist truth, or misinterpret things through their headlines. So, and because the era depicted is when I think movie stars first became sort of more celebrities, then I think that's why it makes sense. Then it was during this era, then like the newspapers became a bit more out there in their reporting, more gossipy and more about
more tabloidy,
the glamour, and less about the actual story and the truth.
Yeah.
But so that plays into the plot a lot, because you actually do have police corruption. You actually have the police working with a newspaper to benefit each other, to like create a story for them, but where they're actually staging it in a certain way, then it benefits both sides, because the newspaper will paint them in a good sort of light. They'll get some statistics that look favourable to them, but the newspaper also gets a juicy story.
Yeah.
So you have the Guy Pearce and you have the Russell Crowe characters, two very different cops. I mean, Russell Crowe playing, again, very close to probably Russell Crowe in real life. More sort of brutish, sort of one, more sort of highly masculine. And Guy Pearce is the opposite. He's playing the younger one, the one who's a bit more feminine, a bit more, sophisticated in his approach. He's more interested in progressive ways and thinking outside of the box, whereas, the Russell Crowe one is a bit more traditional in his approach to. So it's actually one of the best things about the movie, watching them slowly put their differences aside and get to the heart of what's going on and actually fight the crime and bring the perpetrators to justice. As you said, there's a fantastic cast. Danny DeVito's in it as well. He plays a classic Danny DeVito style character. He's so good in it. And Kim Basinger has never been better because she I think she won the Oscar for it.
She did. She won the Oscar for Best Supporting Actress for this one. I remember that.
And I think the reason her performance is so good is because she's playing a character actually modelled on Veronica Lake.
Yes, I knew that.
So the trick to her character and the skill in the performance is that she has to balance playing a certain prestige of this style actress, but at the same time convince you that she is the character she's playing in the film in its own right. And she does it so well. I actually think she's quite an underrated actress. I think she's better than a lot of people
actually. Yeah,
give her credit for. But this was the chance to prove that, and I think she is very good in it. She's a character you really feel for and root for, and it's a tremendously stylistic film.
Yes, I do remember that about it.
Nails the period so well. But it's also a really good, hard-boiled sort of noir, like you said. Really meaty themes, great performances. So, yeah, the total package, really, for this kind of movie. And Curtis Hanson has done some good movies anyway. Obviously, one of his really early ones, The Hand That Rocks the Cradle.
Oh, God, that movie is messed up.
Well, it kind of is, but it's very much a movie of its time. I like to call it a yuppie sort of thriller type thing because that was a thing in the early 90s, definitely. But no, he's done some good movies. A movie of his I quite like, which is a lesser known one, is Bad Influence with Rob Lowe.
Oh, okay.
James Spader, and one of our favourite, Marcia Cross, is in it. So
so I'll have to go and see it now.
Yeah, that's a movie for you to track down. But he also did The River Wild. He did Wonder Boy. So he had quite the career. But I think LA Confidential is his sort of masterpiece, really. So that's my number 6.
Very good. Yeah, I've only seen it once, but I remember when I did see it being very impressed by it. And I remember really being blown away by Kim Basinger because I hadn't really seen her much in anything else. So I remember thinking her performance was great. I always love a bit of Rusty. I know he's a bit of a controversial character, but I like Russell Crowe. He's
a good actor when he's on his game. Yeah.
So no, that's a really good pick. It's definitely a movie I'm going to have to revisit, I think, soon and remember how good it was. All right, so we're moving into, where are we? We're at number 5. Okay, top 5. Yep, okay, cool. So my number 5 is actually a childhood favorite of mine because as we talked about, this is the decade that I pretty much grew up in. So I had to have a movie on here that is from my childhood and is a childhood favorite. And the one that I have picked is Free Willy. Did you ever see Free Willy as a kid?
Yeah, it's another one. It's been a long time. So it's one that, I did enjoy as a kid.
Yeah.
It's been so
So
long, I can't really say if I would still enjoy
yeah.
it. But
This
yeah.
movie sparked my obsession with orcas and my love for orcas and my absolute disgust at the fact that orcas are in captivity. I remember seeing this when I was 8. I saw it with my dad at the cinema, and we both loved the movie so much that we actually went and saw it again at the cinema because it was just that. I mean, I think Free Willy is one of those movies that really epitomizes like the hopefulness and the optimism of the 90s that I feel that we've lost a little bit in recent years, especially after post 9/11 and the movie landscape just changed. But the 90s was so full of all those movies where you really did feel like you could do anything. Hey, is there an orca in captivity? Do you want to free it? Sure, we can do that. I mean, it's no problem. And I just found, I mean, it's one of those movies. It's like, a human makes friends with an animal, and they were quite big in the 90s. There was like one about a girl and a seal, and there was Flipper, with the dolphin, and this one was obviously the killer whale Willie. And I just really love the story. It's a really sweet, cute story. You've got the main character, Jesse, who's a foster kid. So he's obviously dealing with a lot of issues, comes to this foster family. The dad is played by Michael Madsen, who apparently has said in his entire career, he's only ever done like 5 really good movies. And he actually lists this one as one of them.
Oh, fair play.
Yeah. And it's got what is his name? He's from Scanners. The bad guy in Scanners, Michael Ironside.
Oh, I love that too. Yeah.
Yes, he's always playing a bad guy, and this was the first time I ever saw him play bad guy.
So as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. So he plays the owner of the amusement park, and he's the one that eventually realizes that Willie isn't making him enough money, so they decide to kill the whale to collect the insurance, which is why they decide to free him. But everything about this movie is so feel good, It's got that 90s hopefulness, that 90s optimism. It's got a beautiful score. I'm not sure who did the score, but the score is absolutely beautiful. And the opening scene of the orcas playing in the water and swimming and jumping around to this absolutely gorgeous score is just beautiful. It is a fun movie because it actually does have some stakes, Because towards the end of the movie, it's like, oh my God, are they going to get the whale into the ocean? Is it going to be okay? Is it going to happen? And it's a movie that when I revisit it, I still find that it holds up. You know how some childhood movies are very much meant for kids. So when you watch them as an adult, you're like, oh, okay, so this is just nostalgia remembering that this was good. No, Free Willy is actually still a good movie. I don't rewatch it as much as I rewatch some of the other movies on this list, but I do own it and I do love it. I have the sequel as well, which was really not as good, but it's just like I said, because this era was my childhood. And my favorite childhood movie is actually from the 80s, so I couldn't include it in here. So I had to go with, I had to go with a childhood fave just to capture that kind of feeling of optimism and everything. So that's my number 5 pick, Free Willy, just one of my favorites, and will forever love orcas now because of that. So yeah.
And it gets bonus points because it also makes for a good porn title, and
very, very true.
You don't even have to change the title to make it work, which is impressive.
I remember in primary school, a lot of us that's right. We came up with an alternate title for Free Willy, which was The Detachable Penis. So
very nice, very nice.
So that was fun, yes.
And I really I forget, is it Laurie Perry who's in it?
Yes, Laurie Petty is in it.
Point Break, Tank Girl as well.
Yes.
Yeah, she's always good.
She is.
Who plays the kid? I can't remember.
His name is Jay. Oh, it was like Jay Richards or Jay Austin Richards or something. He didn't go on to do much else. I think he pretty much just did these films.
Okay.
And then he's in an episode of Sabrina the Teenage Witch, and I think he did a few others. He was actually, I think, my very first young crush was the kid from Free Willy. I always remember that.
Really good family movies. They're a bit of a lost ark, really are now, because what a good family movie does so well is then it appeals to both the adults and kids, and it sounds like that's an example.
Well, like I said, my dad and I both loved it so much that we decided to go see it together
and
again.
Bonded over it.
And bonded
that's
over
great.
It. Yeah,
very good. Okay, so my number 5, and it actually connects to that choice quite well, but it's also our first crossover of the list. My number 5 is Jurassic Park.
I had a feeling. I had a feeling we would both have this. Yes, very nice.
The classic, yeah. So once again, talking about great family movies, this is an example of how you do a great family movie. It's a good example of Spielberg and his love for like B movies and monster movies.
Yeah.
But obviously making it into more of a spectacular, like blockbuster style family type thing. The tronics and the quality of that, and how it just changed the game, and how, I mean, nearly 30 years later, that it still holds up so well. Yeah. Great characters, great casting. They obviously cast it to perfection. Some great lines of dialogue. It just has a bit of everything for a good, like, family adventure style movie. And it's the sort of movie that Spielberg, at his best, does like none other, really. And it changed the game for that kind of film, and for like dinosaurs on screen. It suddenly made dinosaurs on screen a whole of a lot more fashionable.
Yeah.
And it's also scary in places, as we've said,
definitely.
Crucially, seeing it in the cinema and really being on the edge of my seat. And it's similar to what you said with the last film, because when this was first out, I did actually see it twice at the cinema. I saw it with my mother one week, and then another week with my brother.
Nice.
And I think I've told this story before, but like in between those two screenings, we went to another film, and we could hear the dinosaurs through the wall. So, which is the way it should be.
Yes, absolutely.
But yeah, it holds up. It's a masterpiece of a movie for me. It never really ages in any way, so it's still a classic. And as Rachel said earlier, there's a pretty meaty long review of it on the channel. We're sort of slowly working our way through the whole.
Yeah, we lost our way a little bit.
We'll have to go back to it soon. Yeah. But we've done the first two, so you can check out those reviews. And once again, similar to some of your other choices, the reason it made the list for me, and the reason it's so high, is because it was a big part of my youth, my younger days. And at the time, I was about 12 or 13, which was about the target age for this. So it's sort of brought me exactly the right age, and swept me up in the whole thing, really.
Number 4. This is very different to any other movie that I have on my list, actually. It's almost a bit of an outlier, but I freaking love this movie so much. And that is the Martin Scorsese classic, Goodfellas. Absolutely love Goodfellas. So this is my favorite gangster movie. I think this blows The Godfather out of the water. Like, seriously, people, if you want a good gangster movie, watch Goodfellas. Don't watch The Godfather. I think this movie is possibly one of Scorsese's best, if not his best. It is so well made, this movie. I love the cinematography. I love the direction. The casting is superb. The late, great Ray Liotta is so good in the main role as Henry Hill. He is brilliant. I think he manages to really play the character in a really charismatic way, but also a way that makes you like, oh, this guy is definitely dodgy. Like, what is going on here? Joe Pesci, who won the Oscar for this role, so freaking good as Tommy in this movie. He is just, such a scary little man, but he's just brilliant. De Niro is fantastic as well. I mean, obviously, De Niro is always great, but he's really particularly good in this. Who's the actress who plays his wife? Brasco?
Lorraine Bracco.
Lorraine Brasco. Yes, her. She's fantastic as well.
She's very good.
Yeah, everyone in this movie is so, just so good. And I think the movie, it has such a great energy to it, like this really frenetic energy. It really puts you in the world of these gangsters. And what I really like about Goodfellas is, unlike The Godfather and like other gangster movies that are about the higher ups, this isn't. This is about the lower rings of being in gangs, Henry Hill, he's not a mafia don. He's not even a made man. He can't become a made man because he's Irish. So this is more about the fringes, but you really get to see how these people get so caught up in this life in this decadent life of booze and drugs and privilege. Like, I love that long tracking shot of them going to the club, and they enter through the back door and they go through the kitchen and they come out into the main club, and they move the table for them right down the front of the stage, and they bring the champagne over, and they really show what it means to be in this life and to be right in the middle of it. And then the slow decline of Henry's life, and how everything kind of spirals and snowballs out of control. I love watching this movie. And the thing is, this is another movie that has quite a long runtime, but it doesn't feel like it's that long because it is so well paced and it is so well made. I think it's really funny in parts. I think it's got some really good dark humor. Some really great, action sequence, some real violence in this film that just makes you go, whoa, okay, step back for a second. And I think it does a really good job of showing the entirety of the life, the good and the bad, how it can be thrilling and exciting and wonderful, but it can also be dangerous and scary, and you can be turned on at any minute, like you don't know who's in whose pocket and who's whispering in whose ear. It just does such a great job of showing that life and everything about that. And I know that the real Henry Hill, I think, like, really loved the movie and actually came out of witness protection to like attend the premiere. And like the cops were like, okay, well, we can't put you back in witness protection now. You decided to leave. And yeah, so Goodfellas, like I said, it's a bit of an outlier on this. It doesn't quite fit with the rest of the movies I've got, but I just love this film so much. It's such a great movie, so meaty, so well made. Like I said, Scorsese, I think this is one of his better films, and I love the actors, I love everything about it. So it's my number 4 is Goodfellas.
Yeah, very good. And what I like about that pick is it's in a genre that you don't normally like, and it's similar for me. So that actually says something for what the film's doing. And one of the important things too that you highlighted was the Lorraine Bracco performance and character, and I think that's something to be said about it as well, because it actually does have good female characters, because we're so used to it being about the men in like gangster movies, but you do actually have like a well-rounded, sympathetic female character. So that's definitely something that gives it a bit more. And Joe Pesci was on such a roll in the early 90s. It sort of feels like his peak. Another 90s film I love, which is a straight-up comedy more, is My Cousin Vinny. He's absolutely fantastic
he's
in that.
So good in that. Him and Marissa Tomei.
She's amazing.
She's brilliant. Yeah, no, definitely. Joe Pesci is just...
Obviously, Home Alone. I mean, the crooks in that movie really, in many ways, make the movie. So, he was on such a roll back then. Some really great choice role. So I'll say about the movie, I like it. I'm not sure if I love it. I might find it a little bit overrated. And I can't really say why. There's no particular
sometimes it
reason.
Just doesn't. Sometimes there's no particular reason. You just don't quite get. Sometimes if you watch a movie and you'll be like, it's good, but it doesn't quite live up to what it's been hyped up to being.
But it's a good movie, and I like it, like you said, because it is so different to some of your others. So it gives it a good sort of variety of stuff. And another good one for like gangster movies with Scorsese. I don't know if you've ever seen Mean Streets, which was one of his.
No, I haven't seen that one. I'll have to check that out.
So that's worth seeing. And we're obviously planning on doing seasons, like director seasons. So I think Scorsese will be one that we'll have to do some of his movies.
Yes, so I think so.
King of Comedy is a really underrated Scorsese film.
Okay.
It's absolutely brilliant. And it's probably one of De Niro's best performances as well.
Oh, cool.
But 4, I've gone a bit more to the art house end on this one. And I don't know if you've heard of this movie or not, but it's called Three Colors Blue. That's my number 4.
No, I don't think I've heard of this one.
Okay, so have you heard of the Three Colors trilogy?
No.
Okay.
I don't think so.
So this is the first movie in the Three Colors trilogy.
Okay.
Which the trilogy from France, and each color obviously represents each color of the French flag, and like each movie is meant to represent a different theme to do with like France at the time in the 90s. So
Okay.
each movie definitely digs into different political aspects of France at the time. So I think this movie is meant to sort of represent freedom. I think that's the underlying theme. But so you've got Juliette Binoche in the lead role.
Yeah, I just saw that.
Amazing actress, one of my favourite actresses. Even if she's in a weaker movie, she's always great in it. But yeah, this is one of the performances that really put her on the map. So she plays a woman who loses her husband and her daughter tragically in a car accident at the start of the movie. So the movie becomes her picking up her pieces of her life after that. So it's very much about trauma, about the psychology of trauma, about how it impacts your day-to-day life. In the case of her husband, he was like this big composer, and he was composing this really big piece at the time of his death, which was supposed to be about kind of the idea of bringing together like the different countries of Europe. And so there was a lot of pressure on him with this big piece. But one of the things it reveals at quite an early stage in the film is that she was actually helping him with the music at the time.
Oh, okay.
So I think it gets a little bit into like the sexism of that sometimes, of how a female can sometimes be behind the great art of a man, but not given the credit. She has to be in the background. But that's one of the things the movie does so well. It really captures how once you lose someone like close to you, that then hangs over you in your day-to-day life for the rest of your life, really, or certainly for a long time. Music and who he was hangs over her. So she tries to continue and finish off the music for this thing. And so it becomes like this sort of metaphor of how his life hangs over her in death, but it becomes this thing of the music hanging over her, and that's kind of the metaphor. But it also does this really beautiful thing with music where at certain dramatic points when she's like confronted with something, it will have a sudden outburst of like operatic sort of music, and then the screen will fade to black, and then it will come back to her, and it's just meant to represent, you know, a different like emotion. But the way it plays out is that she starts to find out different things about his life. So like secrets like come to the surface, and she starts dealing with his death and the loss of their child in a very unconventional way at times. So it follows her interactions with like a dancer, a exotic dancer, sort of helping her out, sort of thing. Gets quite involved in her life. The tone and the feel of it is so well judged because knows when to be really quiet and really like intimate and just let Juliette Binoche do everything through facial expressions. And because for a lot of the movie, it is quite silent. There's not that much dialogue. Like it's very beautifully shot. It has a very washed out, dreamlike palette at times, and obviously her performance is like top notch. It's an excellent performance. It obviously has to be because she's in the majority of the film. But yeah, it does pick its moments very nicely to have a bit of music to tell a particular beat. And she's just so committed to the role because there's this notable thing on the set where there's a scene where she like runs her knuckles across like a stone wall, and Juliette Binoche insisted on actually doing that, like not faking it but actually doing it. And Yeah, the director tried to talk her out of it, said you don't have to do this, and she ended up doing it anyway. So I'm not quite sure if she did it behind his back or in the end she was just so persistent that he let her. But yeah, so what you see in the movie is actually her doing that. So that's real commitment. But yeah, she's wonderful in the movie, and there's certain moments in the movie where it does feel like it's going into, like, to use a more mainstream example, but a ghost style film, because
Oh, okay.
you have scenes where you do get her husband coming to her in like visuals type thing and having a conversation with her. So it's a credit to the movie that those scenes don't feel jarring, like they don't feel like they're from a different movie. It makes it work. So this is the best of the trilogy, though. It's funny because a lot of people think the last film, Red, is the best, and
Okay.
just to be a bit contrary, I actually think that might be the weakest of the three. The middle one, White, is underrated, actually. I think that deserves more love, but that's a bit more of a black comedy. And that's got Julie Delpy in. She's the
Oh, I
lead.
love Julie Delpy.
Good actress. Yeah. So, but yeah, Three Colors Blue is the one I've gone with. I recommend this film, and I recommend the trilogy. And Juliette Binoche is just world class. She's amazing in this.
Oh, it's another one I'll have to add to my list. I really like that pick, by the way. It's such a unique pick. Like, I've never, like, it's just so different and so not mainstream. So that's very, very cool.
Yeah.
So I'll have to add that to my list. Well, speaking of mainstream, my number 3 pick is not going to surprise you. I don't think it's going to surprise anyone on this list, because eventually it had to pop up on this list because it's a 90s movie and it's one of my favorite 90s movies, and it's Scream. It was going to be on this list somewhere.
It was always going to be.
It was always going to be on this list. I mean, if you watch this channel, if you've watched horror movie discussions, you know that I love Scream. It's my favorite horror movie. It's one of my favorite movies ever. And of course, it was made in 1996, so it has to be on this list. I mean, I don't think there's much else I can say than what we've already said before about it. Obviously, it was a trailblazer as far as, you know, ushering in a new wave of horror. Wes Craven at the helm, fantastic. We all love Sidney Prescott. You know, just a great film. I mean, if you guys want more details, just, go watch our Scream reviews or even our top 10 horror films. I've talked so much about this film on this channel that I don't really need to go into much more detail, but it was obviously going to be on this list, and it was obviously going to be high on this list because I just love Scream so much, and just, favorite horror movie of all time. So I'll just leave it at that. Guys, go check out our Scream reviews because they are really good discussions. We really get into it, and you'll see more of my love for that movie there. But that's my number 3. It's Scream.
And definitely another film that typified the 90s.
Yes, absolutely.
Quite nicely with my number 3. So it's not Scream, but it's another iconic horror from the 90s. I'll say it 3 times, actually. So it's Candyman.
Oh, I'm so thrilled. that made your list. It's funny it didn't make mine, but that's awesome. That is so cool that's on your list. We all know how much I love Candyman.
Yeah, that's actually the one I thought you might have had, or one of the ones anyway. But okay. Yeah, no, this is another one we've waxed lyrical about, but it's definitely a film that gets better the more you watch it, because
absolutely
I liked it anyway, but on rewatches it's just gotten better and better. It was, for its time, like the early 90s, it was ahead of its time. It's
really
so
was
culturally important in what it's telling, and Tony Todd, it made his name, and deservedly so. It's such an iconic villain, but a very humanistic villain with a lot of layers, and it really pokes at some provocative, powerful themes.
Yeah.
Obviously, you've got a good cast in general. Virginia Madsen is very good. I always enjoy her in movies whenever she pops up. Sander Berkeley playing a sleazebag as he normally does.
God, he is,
and he plays them very well. So
very well.
He's got a great cast of characters. Very scary, very haunting and atmospheric. The Philip Glass score is one of my
Beautiful.
favorite scores from any
too.
movie probably ever.
Mm-hmm.
But it just ticks all the boxes for a great horror movie where you've got depth to it to go along with it just being a really disturbing, unsettling movie. Great characters, great drama, great suspense, and a great ending. I really like the twist at the end of the film.
Yes, me too.
That was a really brave choice. So
It was.
it holds up, and I think a movie like this, which has only got better on repeat viewings, is always going to be one that ranks quite high for me because that's really impressive. But Candyman, it's a standout for horror fans, for a lot of horror fans anyway. So that's my number 3.
Well, I'm definitely on board with that. You know, we all know how much I love Candyman. That I think Candyman would probably crack my top 20. Just didn't quite make it into the top
Not
10.
quite
But
the top
I mean,
10.
I love Candyman. Tony Todd with his sexy, sexy voice making me want to be his victim. You know, he's just fantastic. And you're right. I'm the same. Every time I rewatch the film, I'm like, God, this just gets better and better. The social commentary, the beautiful and kind of tragic love story that's at the center of Candyman's mythos, you know, everything about the scenes with Tony Todd and Virginia Madsen. And like you said, that ending is fantastic. So that's a great choice. Absolutely love it. Okay, we are at top 2. Wow, it's been quite a ride. So my number 2 film is one of my absolute favorite films of all time. I don't know that people love this film, and it's a well-known film mostly because it was the director's debut film. But that is Sofia Coppola's The Virgin Suicides is my number 2. I love this film, like, with all of my being. And I know it's really weird because it's kind of a morbid film when you think about it. I also love the book. The book is one of my favorite books. And I think this is one of the best, if not the best, movie adaptations of a book I've ever seen, because Sofia Coppola manages to capture the tone of the book and the feel of the book and the characters of the book so well, which is actually kind of hard to do because the book, despite its subject matter, is actually darkly funny in places. And I think that Coppola actually gets that in the movie. She gets that beautiful dreamlike quality that the book has. I love her direction on this movie. I mean, I know she comes from like Hollywood royalty, but that doesn't always guarantee that you're going to be good at it, you know? But I think that this really shows her strength as a director and the way she coaches the performances out of her young cast. I remember Kirsten Dunst talking about how it was unlike any other films that she'd been on, but there was so much support for the girls and so much support from Sophia, and some of the scenes that she had to do that she was very uncomfortable with, you know, Sophia made her feel really at ease and helped her through them. And I just think that's such a great atmosphere, especially for young girls in Hollywood that don't always have this kind of safe space on a film set, and especially for a film that deals with such a dark subject matter. I think the cast of this movie is fantastic. You've got Kirsten Dunst, who is, I think, probably one of the most underrated actresses of her generation. She is just fantastic in everything. Kathleen Turner and James Woods are very, very good as the parents. That was fantastic casting. It's narrated by Giovanni Ribisi, and his kind of low, gravelly drawl is I think he's the perfect voice for the boys that are watching The Lisbon Girls with me after it. Like, I remember just for days afterwards, the movie was still in my head and kind of in my being, and I was still just kind of caught on just the almost disturbing beauty of the film, you know? Like, it's such a dark subject matter, and this isn't a spoiler because they tell you right at the beginning of the movie, you know, it concerns the suicides of 5 teenage girls, and that's such a dark subject matter, but the movie does it in such a almost beautiful way. It's really hauntingly disturbing at times, this movie, how beautiful it is in portraying such a hard subject matter. And I think it really shows what drove, I mean, you don't ever really find out, like, that's kind of a theme of the movie. It's like everyone had a theory as to why, but you do see the circumstances that brought these girls to the point where this was their only escape. And I think that everyone in the film does such a great job of portraying it. Again, it's a film that doesn't have a lot of dialogue, you know, a lot of it is done through montages and showing the girls, separate from everyone, and it really shows how people didn't know how to deal with that sort of stuff. I mean, we don't know how to deal with suicide that well these days, let alone back in the 70s, which is when the film is set. So I think it does a great job of showing the awkwardness and the weirdness, and what do you do when someone has suffered this kind of tragedy, and how do you cope with it? And it shows how it shatters the kind of idyllic neighborhood that they live in, where they think everything's perfect, and you have that beautiful facade, almost like a David Lynch film. You have that perfect facade, but underneath is all the darkness. And yeah, it's just such a well-made film. The score by they're like a Air, that's the one.
I was going to mention the score. It's brilliant.
It is absolutely brilliant. It's one of my favorite film scores, and I think it really captures the atmosphere and the tone of the book and of the movie so well. So yeah, this is one of my favorite films of all time. This was my favorite film for a while when I was a teen, and so it gets my number 2 spot. It just sneaks in because it was made in 1999, so it just sneaks into the 90s. But it's a fantastic, fantastic film, and I'd highly recommend that everyone watch it. So that's my number 2, The Virgin Suicides.
Yeah, 99 was actually a bit of a golden year for Hollywood films, because it seemed to be around the time where you were getting a new wave of exciting young filmmakers. And this was part of that, because I think Being John Malkovich was the same year, or either that or the year after, but that was obviously Spike Jonze's first film. So American Beauty around about the same time. So it was this sort of wave of promising young Hollywood directors for a while is really important, because what makes it so shocking and disturbing, the film, is then they don't give you a reason behind the suicide. Like, seemingly when you watch these girls, obviously they're at a particular time in their life, and there is some like trauma there and stuff. And one of the things I think about the film is then you get the impression then there's a lot of pressure from their parents. Then the parents are putting a little bit extreme pressure on them. So that's maybe one reason you could look into it. But in general, it's the sort of thing where just watching them throughout the film, you never would have said these are girls who are going to commit suicide. And the fact that it's all of them. But that's what adds to the power of that. Then there isn't really a reason given in the film. It just sort of happens. And that makes it more shocking. Whereas if you could see it coming in many ways, it wouldn't be as disturbing.
Yes.
Because it's almost like, well, that's sad and tragic, but it kind of makes sense. It felt they were going that way. But and once again, it's that thing of with certain movies where it's not explaining things that actually makes it more
absolutely. Actually, when you said watching, that reminded me, that's one thing I do love about the movie, is it has a sense of voyeurism, which is in the book as well, because the movie isn't told from the point of view of the Lisbon girls. It's told from the point of view of the boys who watch them from across the street. So we're seeing it through the boys' eyes, and I think that the movie really gets that sense of voyeurism, that sense of watching people that you don't quite know, but you're trying to get to know, but you don't know how to breach that. So you end up having to make up things and think of things yourself to explain what's going on. And I think that Sophia like really captured that, because that is very prevalent in the book, and I think she did such a great job of capturing that voyeuristic angle. It's just such a great movie.
And I think it really captures so perfectly adolescence and the experience of it, and to show actually both sides, from the male and the female, like almost a coming of age style movie. It's sort of a standout in that like subgenre as well.
Absolutely.
But some good films since, but she's never bettered it, and
I don't think she has.
Might never. No, it's such a good film. But 2, and we were actually talking about this director earlier off air, but my number 2 is The Truman Show.
Oh, The Truman Show.
So this is another movie which really captures the 90s in a nutshell, in many ways, because it was the decade where reality TV first became a thing. But once again, this is a movie that was ahead of its time in the way it portrayed that. And just as a great sci-fi sort of high concept movie, it is such a creative film, such a daring
Yeah.
and bold film. And I really like the mix of it being quite a mainstream film that was quite accessible, but also having all these extra layers and actually being a very courageous and arty sort of movie in the way it was made. It seems to be one of those things that doesn't happen that often, where
Mm.
when you're watching the movie, at times it feels very much like an art house movie, but it also manages to be a blockbuster to some extent as well, where it is quite accessible. It's got obviously a good budget, it's got a good style to it, the feel to the film. You've obviously got mainstream stars.
Mm.
Now, I personally don't get on very well with Jim Carrey and his comedy.
Me either. Me either.
The odd one, maybe, but in general, I find his brand of humour not very appealing, and a
Me
lot
too.
of his movies I don't like because of that.
Yeah.
So whenever he plays against type and actually does
Yes.
something a bit more dramatic, is when
Mm-hmm.
I can get into him more.
Me
And,
too. Absolutely agree with you there.
and he's excellent in this.
Yes.
And one of the tricks is that he actually doesn't have to deviate too much from the Jim Carrey
Mm.
comic persona, because that sort of feels like it's part of this character.
Yeah.
But they just tone it down enough, and he does a good job of like holding himself back, sort of thing, and feeling like a realistic enough character, but with those quirky, you know, Jim Carrey type mannerisms at times, and just certain lines. But in general, it's a more toned down performance, and it's a character that you obviously follow the way he's being followed on TV by all these millions. And once again, voyeurism plays a lot into
Yes.
this
Yes.
role, this part, and just the level that they go to in exploring this, and just what a weird idea it is of having your life just broadcast
I
daily.
know.
Pretty messed up and disturbing and quite surreal. But I sort of like how it doesn't make any judgments either way. Like, it doesn't actually demonize the people who watch
No,
this
you're
sort of
right. You're
show.
right. Yeah.
I actually quite like how it engages with them, and you get some quirky sort of funny scenes with them.
Yeah.
And in a way, it just lets you decide for yourself which side you're on. But
Mm.
you've got a great cast. Ed Harris is wonderful in it.
Yes.
He's so icy and sort of heartless as like the producer of the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Very underrated performance by Ed Harris. Laura Linney,
Laura
very
Linney
good.
again.
Never
Always
really puts her
fantastic.
foot wrong.
No.
I forget her surname, but the Tasha Macker,
Yes, yes, yes. I know who you're
the
talking
one,
about. Yes,
yeah.
yes, yes.
And she's another little gem of an actress who
She is. She is,
probably
yeah.
deserves a bit more credit than she gets, but she is
Mm.
very good in this, as well
Yes.
as the sort of one who was like the high school sort of
The one who got
sweetheart.
away, kind of.
Yeah, and they're obviously
Yeah.
pushing more the Laura Linney character onto him
Mm.
for the sake of ratings, and it's the Natasha Macaron character who legitimately cares for him and is
Yes.
trying to point out that the whole thing is a show, it's a farce, this isn't your life. And
Yeah.
the moment in the middle of the film where he actually cottons on, and like the Laura Linney character
Where
slips
she
up.
starts having the breakdown in the kitchen. Is that what you're talking about?
It,
She's all like, "Oh, if you'd like to buy this," he's just like, "Who are you talking to?"
yeah,
Yeah.
that's a
Mm.
wonderful moment. That is
That
such
is.
a great moment where the facade slips, and
Yes.
it just sort of shows you, like, if you're in that position, you would have to be so on your game all the time,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
one little slip, then it just wouldn't hold up. And
Mm.
I think that's almost holding a mirror up to this idea of reality TV and
Yes.
idea of truth is, well, is there really such a thing as truth? And
Mm.
what exactly is reality? Because My whole thing with reality TV is like I'm very suspicious of it anyway, because as we see in
Yeah.
this movie, I think a lot of times they do encourage the people on these shows to act in a certain way. But the other important thing to say is that anytime you put a camera on someone, they're going to act differently than they would
Yes.
if the camera wasn't there. If you're aware of the camera being there, without knowing, you're going to act differently. So
Yeah.
that's another thing. But it's a wonderful movie. It's a
Yeah.
beautiful movie. It's a great satire, great cast, great performances. And the end scene is another great scene. The end scene is one of my favourite end scenes maybe ever.
It's beautiful, isn't it? It's fantastic.
But I love the music. I get emotional every time I watch the movie. You're on this journey with this character, and a bit like, you know, the manic sort of fans watching on TV. You are invested in him.
Yeah.
What's going to happen to him, and it's a credit to the film that there's so much suspense over that stuff at the very end of the movie. But it's once again a movie that has held up over multiple viewings, and I think for me it is a bit of a classic and is a bit of a cornerstone of the 90s.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think even if you are a massive Jim Carrey fan and a massive fan of his comedies, I think you're still going to get some value out of seeing these different, more indie style roles from him.
Yeah, Truman Show. It's like, I mean, everything that you've said, it basically covered it. It's just, it's so well made. I'm with you. Carrie, he bugs me. Like Ace Ventura, Liar Liar. It's too much. I can't deal with him at all. But when he is toned down, like this or Eternal Sunshine, that's when I think he's definitely at his best. And I do think he's really good in this role. Like you said, it's like Jim Carrey, but like less. You know, just a little bit like more contained. And I think that when he starts to, when the facade starts to crack, particularly, he's very good at showing the panic and the, oh my God, what's going on? And you've got the little romance with the girl who got away, which gives that touch of humanity. Ed Harris, like you said, is just he's playing that kind of all-powerful, omnipresent.
Almost like a godlike.
Almost like a god. And you can see that he kind of thinks of himself as that way as well, you know? And it's just, it's a great movie. It was actually one of those movies that for ages, I would only catch bits and pieces on TV. And then one day I finally sat down and watched the whole movie and realized that I actually had seen the whole movie, just not like all in one go. So that was cool. But no, that's a great choice. Do we want to do some honorable mentions before we get to number one?
Okay.
Have you got me? See, we could be here forever if I listed all my honorable mentions but I do want to mention just three.
Okay.
I want to mention my three favorite action movies from the 90s that didn't make this list because they're not great movies, but they're guilty pleasures and they're fun. Okay. And that is Speed, Armageddon, and Con Air. Because those are just such staple 90s action movies. So dumb. So much fun. Con Air in particular is just the dumbest movie alive. So is Armageddon, mind you. But it doesn't take itself too seriously. Con Air has such a great cast. You know, you've got John Malkovich just chewing the scenery and Steve Buscemi, just having the time of his life. Armageddon's got Billy Bob Thornton and Jason Isaacs and Bruce Willis. And Speed, Sandra Bullock and Keanu Reeves together in Speed. Just magic. Plus, oh boy, did I end up with such a crush on Keanu Reeves after seeing Speed. Like, oh, the man is hot in that. So I have to quickly mention those three because I love those action movies so much, but they're not quite good enough movies to actually make the top 10. So those are my little brief honorable mentions. Do you have any that you want to mention?
Yeah, I've got quite a few. I won't probably, but Speed is another one I love. It's one I saw at the time and I've rewatched since. Yeah, it's brilliant. Keanu and Sandrick are so... Sandrick, I made up a new name. Sandra are so good. It's Sandrick, that's her name. And also Dennis Hopper being a great villain as he always was. But no, it's a great movie. Speed as a fun action movie, and That's another thing. The 90s actually did action really well, and
Yes,
it's another
it
thing to say it's so sad now that the standard of action movie is so bad nowadays. They've just, it seems like probably the 80s and 90s were the peak for action movies,
absolutely.
and maybe
Absolutely.
70s a bit as well, but since then they've just lost the art, really.
They have.
And it's pretty depressing. Honorable mentions is another Keanu Reeves movie. It's a movie I absolutely love, and it's Point Break.
Point Break. I think you've mentioned Point Break
I
before.
love it.
Yeah, I haven't
absolutely
seen
love
it, but yeah, I know you've mentioned that you love it before.
One of the great bromance movies as well, because that's the whole point with the Patrick Swayze, Keanu Reeves. Then secretly they are sort of in love with each other, but it's a very masculine style movie, which makes it interesting because it coming from a female director. But Catherine Bigelow is one of my favourite directors.
You've mentioned that you really like her before.
Action scenes so well, and just certain set pieces in this movie, like the skydiving scene. It's just pure cinema. It just immerses you so well. It's just beautiful. But the way she just captures like masculinity, Keanu Reeves very well cast because again he's playing like a Zen-like sort of character. This sort of wet behind the ears but slick like FBI agent. Johnny Utah, another great Keanu.
Johnny Utah, that's awesome.
Yeah. Some fantastic dialogue. You've got Gary Busey at his sort of best.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, he plays like his partner in the film, the more experienced one. Yeah, he has a really good line, which is a bit random, but it's when he points the gun at someone's head. He's like, "Speaking to the microphone, squid brain."
I can hear Gary Busey say that line too. That's awesome.
Yeah, but it's a great. I love this movie. It's again, it's a good example of doing a really good edge of your seat action style thriller movie. Very immersive, but we'll have to do some Catherine Bigelow movies, definitely.
Yes.
Scream was an honourable mention for me, so
Good
I don't
stuff.
have to really say anything about that. Also, Bride of Chucky was an honourable.
Nice.
Big, again, very classic 90s feeling movies. Another film, Magnolia, was a film that almost made it.
With Tom Cruise?
Movie. Yeah, Tom Cruise playing.
That's a weird movie.
Very close to type, yeah. It is quite a weird movie, but you've got all these different characters and stories sort of colliding with each other. Very beautiful, very stylish, very dreamlike. You've got an amazing cast. Philip Seymour Hoffman.
John C.
Reilly. Thomas Anderson is a very strong director, especially for a core set of movies, and this is definitely in with his best sort of work. Another choice, another honourable mention, just to prove I can go for the more cheesy, quirky choices. I absolutely love this movie unashamedly, but Romy and Michelle's high school reunion.
Oh, I love Romy and Michelle's high school reunion. So good.
It's a classic feel-good movie, and the two leads are just so good.
Oh, so good.
The chemistry is just so there, and they're so likable, and they just make ditzy characters feel appealing and charming.
Yes.
And great cast as well. You've got Alan Cumming in there. You've got
Alan Cumming.
Yeah, Janine Garofalo.
Yes, I can never pronounce her last name, but yes.
She's an actress I adore as well.
Yes, she's
very
great.
Underrated. She's great in the movie, but great soundtrack as well. I mean, the scene on the dance floor with the Cindy
Time After Time
is a standout. But that's the thing about the movie. It actually manages to sweep you up. It actually is quite a charming and likable movie.
It is.
It has a heart. It's not just then it's this more, cheesy.
It's not just dumb blondes.
Yeah. Great movies just to pick you up if you're having a rough day sort of thing.
Yeah, it is.
But yeah, I've got quite a lot. A couple of Spanish films I'll throw a bit of light on, which is worth checking out. One is All About My Mother, which is a Pedro Moldovan film. I don't know if you've heard of that director.
No.
He also did Volver with Penelope Cruz. I don't know if you've no.
It's a great title. No.
It's a great title, but yeah, he's kind of like he's known for doing like camp sort of melodramas, very sort of arty feminist style films, and yeah, no, he's been around since the early 80s, so at this point he's done a lot of movies, but there's definitely a good core set of movies. But yeah, this film, All About My Mother, is about a particular secret to do with a certain character and like the character's mother and just their relationship and certain reveals with that. It's very stylistic, again, great use of color, some great like humor in there as well, some good black humor, but yeah, very beautiful, charming movie. So that one. Another Spanish movie I've got as an honorable mention is The Red Squirrel, which is again quite a cult, underrated movie. Good director, actually, Julia Medem. I've seen a few of his movies, but this one might be his best film. It's this very twisted psychological thriller type film.
Throw Candyman into an honorable mention because I do love Candyman. I'm also going to put Interview with the Vampire as an honorable mention, another gothic horror, like a gothic horror from the 90s that I love. And then I'm just going to throw a period drama in, which is Sense and Sensibility, directed by Ang Lee, which was written by Emma Thompson, stars her and Kate Winslet. One of my favorite period drama movies. Absolutely love it. So those will be my honorable mentions. And that will lead nicely into my number one film of the 90s. So this was my favorite film for years and years. It might still be my favorite film. It's kind of partly childhood favorite, but also it's a really great film. It still holds up. And it is an adaptation of my favorite book in the world. And that is Little Women. So that is my absolute favorite. So this novel has been adapted many, many times onto the screen. But the 1994 version, directed by Gillian Armstrong and starring Winona Ryder and Christian Bale, this was the first things I ever saw either of them in. This is my favorite novel in the whole world. I love Little Women. It's just a great novel. And this movie is maybe not the best adaptation, but it's a beautiful movie. I first saw this movie when I was 10, and I remember I rewatched it like every single weekend. I would just put it into the VCR and just watch it again and again and again until I knew it by heart. So the story of Little Women, not the most involved story. It just follows the March sisters when they're younger and then as they grow. It's a coming of age story, basically. The movie pushes Jo to the forefront, which is Winona Ryder's character, because she is the author's self-insert. So she always does get pushed to be the main character. And it's just a beautiful movie. It's made really well. It hits the majority of the points that you want from the book. It follows the basic storyline. But what it really does is it captures the warmth of the book. And every time I read this book, it's like one of those books that you read that just feels like you're going home, you know? Like it's just comfort and warmth and just makes you feel... It's the movie I put on if I'm having a particularly bad day or if I'm feeling upset and I want to feel comforted, I will put this movie on. The performances are fantastic. Like I said, this is the first time I ever saw Winona Ryder in anything, and she just captured my heart because she is so good as Jo, and she's so good. Like she feels like the character from the book. Jo is a character that I always identified with a lot because she's a big tomboy. She's a klutz. She kind of never knows what she's doing and is always getting into scrapes, which is what I always like. The other girls, they've got Claire Danes, very, very young Kirsten Dunst. Again, one of the first things I saw her in. Kirsten Dunst almost steals the whole movie as little Amy. Trini Alvarado, who is an actress who's not very well known, but she's been in a few things. Susan Sarandon plays Marmee. She's fantastic. And it's another movie with a beautiful score. It's one of those scores that I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but sometimes I find when I read books and then you hear the movie score, it's almost like, yes, that is the book come to life as music. Like I feel that with the Harry Potter score, you know, like you hear that score, it's like, yes, that is Harry Potter come to life. I hear this score and I'm like, this is the March sisters come to life in the form of music. It's beautiful. It's sad in all the right places. It makes me cry every single time I watch it, in so many places. And the cinematography is beautiful. The costume design is gorgeous. It's set against the Civil War, and they do a really good job with that. And just everything about the movie just makes me feel so comforted and so warm and just so secure. And it's one of those really comfort, feel good movies. But it's also a really well made movie. And I do think it is the best adaptation of the novel, because some of the other adaptations are just not great and just do not capture the book the way that this one does. And because it's my favorite book, when you have a good adaptation of your favorite book, it just makes it that much better. So I've loved this movie, like I said, since I was 10 years old.
Mm-hmm.
If I was gun to my head to pick my favorite movie of all time, it would probably be this one, as a mix of nostalgia and comfort, and the fact that it is actually a really great movie with really great performances. And it is my top movie of the 90s. So that is 1994's Little Women. Absolutely love it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense, because you've waxed lyrical about it before, so I know you love that one.
Mm-hmm.
So very good. So that makes sense for you. Good pick. It's a good movie. Like, obviously, it's more probably aimed at you than.
I was going to say, you're not particularly the target audience for the movie.
Especially since you loved the book as well.
Yes,
but
yes.
yeah. But no, it's a good movie. I've seen it a couple of times and I enjoy it. Also, a young Christian Bale as well. He's
fantastic.
Yeah.
As Laurie, he's so good. And for years, I didn't know that he was English, because his American accent in this film is so good. And I remember watching some behind the scenes, and he's so Cockney, and I was like, oh my God, he's just so British.
Yeah.
But he's playing Laurie, who's such an American character. Yeah, no, he's really great.
My number one. So it's another movie by a director who I've already mentioned, but as an honourable mention. And it's another Paul Thomas Anderson movie. Okay. And it's the movie which, in my opinion, is his best movie, and that's Boogie Nights.
Boogie Nights. Okay.
And this one has a funny footnote because, of course, Marky Mark himself, Mark
Good old Marky Mark.
Absolutely. And I tell you what makes me hate this guy even more is the fact that he has since distanced himself from this movie and has put it down. Yeah, he slagged it off, basically, I think, and screw him, because this is the movie that put him on the map.
I was going to say, this movie made him.
Gave him his big break, and yeah. And it's so depressing, because this is the movie which proves the guy can act when he puts his mind to it. And he's just gone on to star in these really hollow, crappy Hollywood-style movies.
Is he knowing?
No, but it does sound really bad. Yeah. The Happening's terrible. He's obviously been in some terrible action-style movies, and yeah. Not good. But this is one of the early movies that proves that he can actually act. He is very good in it. And Boogie Nights is a flawless movie. I actually think of it as a musical in a way. But
yeah, I can understand that. Yeah.
Yeah, but a musical mixed in with a more gritty style drama. And I mean, most Paul Thomas Anderson movies, they have great music, and he's one of those directors, and he actually builds up the drama from the ground up, and he actually does it through music, which makes him a very distinct director. So there's a scene in this movie, with Alfred Molina, and it's a scene where they're trying to do this drug deal, and his character, you sort of know the scene. His character is just coked off out of his mind, and he's going all over the shop, and they're really tense about doing the deal and getting out of there. And there's this weird sort of shots in the background throughout the scene that just makes the scene more and more tense, where you don't quite know where the scene's going to go. Like, this guy could just snap or do something really silly at any moment, and the whole thing could go like tits up. And once again, the choice of song, because they're playing Jesse's Scale in the background of the scene, so it's once again subverting that thing where you've got a more light-hearted sort of song, but this really intense scene. And that's a great example of what Thomas Anderson does so well, that sort of scene, part of it, and the fact that it is a film about family. And so the Wahlberg character does come from a broken sort of home, and he leaves home, and that's when he meets the Burt Reynolds character.
Burt Reynolds, oh, isn't he great?
Wonderful in the movie. Yeah, this was his comeback movie, and it's the perfect casting for him.
Yeah, I feel like he was just made to play a porn director, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah. No, he's brilliant, but that's the thing, like that family does become the Mark Wahlberg character's extended family. For better or for worse, because I think the film gets a really good balance of not holding back with some of the more darker aspects of this glamorous industry where he's handed this stuff on a silver platter, and it seems like this ideal sort of career for like this young, like attractive, fit looking guy to go into, you know, lots of money, lots of like women, stuff like that. But it obviously doesn't hide from showing the darker sides. It's a very dark movie. There's some really disturbing, powerful scenes. But I also like then the movie doesn't judge these characters. Neither. I like the fact that it does show that they might not be the most ideal family for him, but in a way they're the only family he's got.
Yeah.
And so one of the examples of that is Julianne Moore, how she becomes like a mother figure for him. And some of those scenes are just so tender and so moving. And it just kind of captures how you have this collection of like oddballs who only really fit in society when they're around each other.
Yeah.
And even though you can say, like, some of this stuff might not be the best for them in the long run, it's kind of all they have in many ways. And so it definitely gets the good balance of the lighter and the darker stuff, where you do invest in these characters, you do follow their journey. Obviously Philip Seymour Hoffman is very likable in it. I think the Don Cheadle character is one of the standouts. He's absolutely brilliant in the movie. He's kind of the guy who sells like stereos. That's like his job. And, he almost has this like cowboy type persona where he's trying to sell them, but he's into like, advanced like technology. And he's a very like likable, quirky sort of character. But it is the theme of family that makes the film so appealing, but it's a beautiful, stunning, cinematic movie. Great soundtrack. I've listened to the soundtrack several times. Just the whole thing's on YouTube, but it's one of the greatest soundtracks of all time. And it's such a powerful, such a tense movie, but such a beautiful movie as well. I think it is flawless. I know a lot of people would say Magnolia is his best film. I think it's very close. I think Magnolia is an excellent movie as well. But for me personally, Boogie Nights is his best film. And it became a calling card for him because I now see it as being underrated, even though it was quite a big movie at the time. And I think commercially it did quite well. And possibly one of his most successful films commercially. But now, over the course of times, I think other movies of his have got higher praise.
And then they've
Blood,
eclipsed
for example,
that one.
and obviously Magnolia. So, yeah, as time have gone on, I think it's become quite underrated. Heather Graham's really good in it.
Yes, I do remember Heather Graham being a standout. Roller Girl.
Roller Girl, yeah. But yeah, it's a great movie. So it is my favourite movie.
That's your number one?
90s.
Nice. I do like Boogie Nights. I think I might feel similarly to this the way you did to when I was talking about Goodfellas. Like, yes, I do like it, and I do think it's a good film, but I don't love it, you know? Like, when I
Okay.
watched it, I remember thinking, yeah, this is a good, solid film, but I've only seen it, like, once or twice. But I mean, I agree, it's very well made. Like I said, Burt Reynolds, he just looks like he was made to play a porn director. Like,
Yeah.
he's just so good in that. And I remember the Julianne Moore character really, like, I felt really bad for her because she was fighting a custody battle for her kids, if I remember correctly. And her relationship
Yeah.
with Marky Mark's character comes about because he's kind of like a surrogate for
Yeah.
the fact that she doesn't have her kids. So I do think it's a really good, solid film. It also might not be 100% my type of film. Like, I am
Sure.
a little bit of a prude when it comes to nudity in film. So watching a film that's
Okay.
about the porn industry, it's like, for me, can be a little bit
Yeah.
too much. So yeah, but I do agree that, like, this does prove that Marky Mark can actually
Can
act.
Yeah,
But
he's
the fact that
very.
he's distancing himself from it, nah, you don't do that, man. Especially not the film that gave you your big break. And,
Yeah.
you know, obviously is the reason that you managed to transition from your tidy whities to the big screen and stop, you know, jumping around singing Good Times. So you've gotta give credit where credit's due. And I think that
Yeah.
it's wrong for him to kind of distance himself from the film that made him so big.
Yeah. Yeah,
Mm.
because also in the film there's good parodies of like the porn industry and the
Mm.
machismo of things like that, and also maybe digging a bit into his career as a rapper in the past, because there is a scene where it's like after he's like broken away from porn and he's had a bust up with the Burt Reynolds character, he actually tries to has a career as like a singer, and it's
Oh,
so
okay.
painfully bad to watch because he's just terrible, but he's just deluding himself. He keeps saying, well, just change the way it sounds in the recording. Like, he's just so deluded, and it's so painful, but
Mm.
it's another great scene. But yeah, the Julianne Moore stuff, like you said, I think that's another good example of what I'm talking about, where at times that character makes a lot of bad choices and it's
Mm.
so hard to watch her, but at her core, she is a really good, decent person who's trying
Yeah.
to do her best.
Yeah,
And
she is.
as
Yeah.
we said, quite a tender relationship with the Mark Wahlberg character. So,
Yeah. Oh,
okay.
that's cool. Well, that was very cool. We like our lists were very different.
Very
And I found that,
diverse.
yeah, very
Yeah.
interesting. Um, and I've noticed that I seem to have gone more for like comfort films and films that remind me of the 90s and stuff, and you've gone more for the more critically acclaimed ones and ones that you found were like really, really like stand out, like well-made films of the 90s. So it's interesting how we come at these lists slightly differently as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that was cool. That one was a fun one. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, no, I think we both throughout our list represented the decade very well. You know, we,
Mm,
we had a bit of everything which you can
yeah.
sort of think of as being typically 90s. Because
Mm.
obviously another one we could have had, which I think we both like, is Clueless, and
Yes, I
I
did consider Clueless. I do love Clueless.
very enjoyable. And it's another film, as we said, started a trend. It's our top 10 movies of the 90s individual lists. And we'll definitely do other decades at different points as well. And as I said, we might return to the 90s at some point and maybe do a slightly bigger list in the future.
So much to choose
So,
from in the 90s, so that's a
yeah, no.
definite
No,
possibility.
it is. It is. So, okay. So yeah, let's have your lists in the comments below, or at least some of your favourites anyway, and yeah, comment on our picks as well. What do you think of the lists overall? Like and subscribe as always, and share us out on social media. Rachel, if you want to promote your channel.
Guys, you can follow me, Rachel Macdonald, video essays on TV shows and movies. I also have my Tumblr linked through there, so come follow me there. And Keith usually puts a link in the description, so come and follow me everywhere.
Okay. Thanks, guys. And just to promote what our next list will be, because it's coming up, because we're now in Christmas season, we'll be doing a top 10 Christmas theme
episode.
TV
Similar to
episode.
our Halloween theme one.
That'll be our next list, so you can expect that sometime in the coming months. So look forward to doing that as well. But take care, guys, and we'll see you again soon. Bye.